Hey Coder, so in this video, we're going to be using Qwik JS to build a full-out front end for our application at CodeRaiders. And the reason why I've chosen to use Qwik JS is because number one, I want to learn a new framework. Qwik is, as it says, super quick. It's also super early. So technically, I shouldn't really be using this for a production environment yet, but why not, right? Let's move fast, break things, and get something up and going. Now, to develop the last application, I used Next.js and React. So this is an application which basically does a lot of financial analysis. It helps pairs traders find pairs that they can trade by doing all sorts of math, backtesting, and analysis. And it basically gives them an edge in the financial markets, a quantifiable edge. Now, I got really tired of using React here because of the useEffect and the useEffect hook with dependencies. So if you are coming from React, yes, we get rid of having to use all those dependencies, which is absolutely amazing. And for the CodeRaiders initiative, basically, I'm going to be building this application that'll have a front end, it'll have an authentication server, etc., etc. This video is not going to cover all of that. I will do that in separate videos. But what I do want to do is explore using Qwik JS as the front end, because server-side rendering is really important to me for a web application. It needs to look, feel, and act like a web application, and server-side rendering helps me to achieve that. It's important for SEO as well. And on top of that, I need something that isn't going to be cumbersome to develop with. It's going to be intuitive. I can get the basic fundamentals right. So I've done some tests with Qwik. I'm by no means an expert programmer in Qwik, but it does what I need it to do. And what we're going to do in this video is spin up a Qwik application. I'm going to call it something like test app, and I'm going to actually create those bare bones basics that I expect a front end application to be able to do. So here's our documentation for Qwik, getting started. And what I'm going to do is go npm create Qwik at latest. And here we go. So I'm going to paste that here in the command line, and it's going to say, what do I want to name my app? Let's just call it something like, we'll call it CodeRaiders here. CodeRaiders, because this is for CodeRaiders. And basic app, let's just go and do that. Do I want to install npm dependencies? Yes. So I'm using npm as my package manager. I'm not using Yarn. Usually I use Yarn because I find it works better with like Ethers.js and Web3 blockchain type libraries. But I found when using Yarn here before, it didn't show me why builds were failing. If I did npm run, it would show me why builds are failing. Could be a Qwik thing. Probably a Sean thing. I'm a self-taught programmer. You're probably going to learn a lot of bad things and bad habits from me. So here we are. Let's go and take a look at this. So here I'm in Qwik Tut. If I do ls, there it is, CodeRaiders. CD into CodeRaiders, code full stop, or just open VS Code or whatever editor you want to use there. So here we go. Here is Qwik JS. It's ready. It's ready for us to rock and roll. Let's just go and hit new terminal and actually go and run this. So I'm going to go npm run dev and head over to Google Chrome, which is what I like to use for web development. So here we go, localhost 5173. Now here what you can see is you can see all of this sort of default stuff that Qwik has provided to us. And we've got examples, right? That's taking us to some hyperlinks to some other places. We've got static web pages. We've got all sorts of stuff, right, that you can do with Qwik. We've got this blow my mind, and it takes us to a page called flower. This does blow my mind. I'm not going to be going over how all of this works because we're going to build it together. Now we're going to do this together so you can understand it from the ground up. But I really love this introduction of how they've done this and actually how responsive this. I mean, it's crazy. Look at that performance, right? In and of itself, that's awesome. So what we're going to do here is head over to our application and figure out some routes. Now, I tell you what, let's build a site that has a test page, and we'll call it our tester page, our tester directory, and our home page. And we'll have a child component that works in the test page, and we'll use Tailwind because I don't want to make this a CSS video, right? I want to make this about Qwik. And we'll have the test page just do some really random, stupid stuff, right? Stuff that helps us figure out and understand, number one, how is Qwik working? And number two, how to actually use the things that are important. So let's go and do that now. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go over here to my index page. This is the home page because it's the first index page that we can see here. And I'm just going to get rid of all of this, right? Let's just just cut it all out. Bang, gone. And let's put something like, you know, h1 tag, and this will be home page as follows. So if I save that, you can see it's already reloaded. Instead of saying welcome to Qwik, we'll just say, you know, home page. And description will just be, hello, my home page. There you go. So if we go back to our application and I come out of this flower directory here, back to the home page, you can see here is home page, right? Now, great, we've got a home page set up, wonderful. Why has it got this header and why has it got this footer? We'll come back to that in a second. Now, let's go and create a directory. I'm going to delete this flower directory here. So move that to trash. And I'm going to create a directory. We're going to call this tester. Now, within tester, we need to create an index.tsx. So index.tsx. Now, if you've used something like Next.js, for example, you would just call this tester.tsx. It would be basically in the same router directory, and that would be your page. That's basically how the routing would work. It doesn't work like that with Qwik. The way Qwik works is you need to create the directory and then the index, but there's an advantage to that. The advantage is I can save other components and other files within that directory. I can save other things basically in that directory and reference them that are related to that page. Now that to me is actually quite useful, and it helps me to keep things which are specific to that page and that page only well organized. So I think that was a really good move. Now what I'm going to do to save time is copy this index page, because there's really not much on here, and paste it there, and we're going to call this test page. And you know, just to make things a little bit more interesting, let's just add some styling to this. So, well, first let's update the head, and this is my test page. Let's make things a little bit more interesting over here. Number one, we can get rid of this link right now because we're not using it, and we're not using it here. But let's add Tailwind. So what I can do, if I go over to my documentation, scroll to the bottom, and go npm run Qwik add. When I do that, it basically gives me a bunch of stuff I can add. I can even incorporate some React components into the Qwik framework, which is amazing. I don't know whether to call it a framework or not, by the way. Someone in the comments will correct me on that, I'm sure. And then here, let's go and hit Tailwind, right? So, right, yes, looks good, install Tailwind. And it's basically just installed Tailwind for me, which, by the way, I just find very useful, because what it also does is it says just copy these items here and paste them in the global CSS, which if you've used Tailwind, you have to do. Right, so let's just do that. Let's get rid of this root here in CSS. Let's keep the body. Let's get rid of everything else. And in fact, I'm going to make the body a slightly darker gray, just slightly. Like that. I love the font family that they've chosen here as default, so I'm going to keep that. And then for the margin here, I'm just going to put 0, just in case. It's just a force of habit. I learned web technologies many years ago, old school, so that's what I like to do. So here we go. Now we've got our CSS sorted. Let's go back here and just go npm run dev. And go back over to this and see how it looks. Great, so a lot of that styling has now gone. We've basically now got this header and this footer, but why is that even there, right? Why do we have a header and a footer there? So I'm on the home page over here. I don't see header and footer. I don't see layout. I don't see any of that here. So why is it there? And in fact, if I now go to my tester page, here we go, now we're on test page. I still have a header and footer, and it's bizarre. Like, why is that? Well, it's because the way layouts work is quite different to what you might be used to as well. So if we go here to layout, here we can see header, slot, footer. Let's say the footer is just going to be something like a simple div tag with some writing, right? So let's change the footer here. I'm just going to give it some class so you can see what's footer and what's not. Background gray, let's make it text white. And here I'm going to say something like this is my footer over here, right? If I save that here, you can see there it is. And let's actually give it some padding as well. Padding Y14, text center. There you go. Here's a footer, right? So that looks like a footer. Why not? And then let's do the same with header. So here, header you can see is coming from another component. I'm just going to get rid of that there. And in fact, even in components, I'm going to delete this header folder. So we can do all of that together literally together, going through it and building it as we want it. Right, great. Now you can see there's an issue, and that's because I need to remove header here as well. There you go. Now there's no header, there's no navigation, there's no header, that's all gone. Great. So what do I want to do? What I want to do is create a nav bar. So let's go over to our components, and let's create a folder here, and let's call it navigation. And therefore, same rules apply, but in here I get to name the component. I don't need to call it index, right? I'm going to call this navigation.tsx. And I have got a extension in VS Code installed for Qwik, by the way. So it's the Qwik extension. You can just use the same thing. It saves me having to type out all the boilerplate over and over every time I create a component. So I'm going to hit Q dash, and in fact, it's not doing it. Q dash, there we go, Q dash Qwik component. And here we go, we've got our components and we can get rock and rolling with it. So let's go and actually create the render for this component here. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put in, say, some div tags to keep things really easy. I'm gonna put in here class flex, items center, and we'll put our logo here. So here I'm gonna say logo, whatever that's gonna be. And down here, we'll put some links as well. So let's actually put here an unordered list, and this can be some links. So here we're going to say home, and here we're going to say tester. And in fact, we can get rid of this here. Could say login, could be whatever you want. I mean, it's just a navigation bar basically. So what do I want to do here? Well, in my layout where I've just got rid of that header, I'm now going to import navigation. So let's go and import that in here and put in here navigation. So this has basically replaced what was a header before. And here we go. It says logo home tester. It's not quite how I wanted it. So let's go and do some refinement over here. So here I'm going to put in a class, and that's also going to be a flex. And this here is going to be class as well. Let's just see how that's looking right now. There you go. That looks better. And what I want to do here is put justify between. You can see I'm just doing minimal CSS to sort of get this flowing. And then let's put some space here. So space X, let's make it 10, something like that, right? So I've got these links here. Let's also give it a background. So let's make background white. So now I can see my navigation bar because it's got a white background. Let's give it a shadow. We'll make it extra large just so it can stand out, and some padding as well, right? So that's way too big. Let's make that padding 5, something like that. There you go. And let's also put a space X here as well. Or in fact, let's do this. Let's go and put margin left 5. And here I'm going to put a class margin right 5. What's that going to do? There you go. Put some buffer on the edges here. Okay, so here's my navigation bar. Very basic, very boring, fantastic. Now let's go and import link from Qwik City. And this is Qwik City to Qwik is basically like Next.js is to React. So my routing and all of that stuff, I'm basically going to be getting from Qwik City. And their documentation, as far as I can tell, is actually quite good. I know a lot of people, they like very in-depth, very extensive documentation. I got exactly what I needed from the documentation for Qwik. So this, this to me was okay. I've seen other people complaining about it. I'm not sponsored to talk about Qwik, by the way. I think it's good. So here, what I'm going to do is go over here to the home page and just put in link there. And there we go. So this is going to link with an href to the home page. And the same again we'll do for tester. So I'm just going to get rid of tester there, rename it here. And we'll put this, /tester. So when I look at my navigation, yeah, I've got to go /tester. So here we go. So here, if I click on home, I'm on the home page. If I click on tester, I'm on the test page. Amazing. You can see it there. You can see it there. Now we have a navigation. This is going to help us start actually getting to grips with Qwik JS. Let's actually start doing some fun stuff. Let's say that I want a different layout for my main site compared to, say, a dashboard or a blog or any of these other things I might want to put on my site, right? So layouts to me are quite important. And when we look at the layout here, we can see that this cascades down to everything, right? So if I've got this layout here, Qwik knows use that layout for everything. Well, actually, if you go to the documentation and you look at layouts, it's actually really quite interesting. It's not like you might think, right? So if you look at layouts, the way it works is you can actually nest layouts within layouts, number one, but that might not work for you. It won't work for my application in the way I want it to. So what I actually want is this named layout. Now, yesterday I messed around with this a bit. I tried group layout where you can create a folder with parentheses. It didn't work for me. I don't know if it was a Sean thing or a Qwik thing, but like I said before, this is still very early days. I basically created something that looks like this. Didn't work for me so well, but what worked fantastically and what I actually really loved was this named layout. And so the way the named layout works is you create your layout with like a dash, the hyphen, and whatever you want to call it. And then when you create your page, you put your @ with the layout name, that extension of that layout name, and it knows to apply that layout to that page. I thought it was genius, worked absolutely fantastically, and that's what we're going to do over here. So this layout here, I'm actually going to rename this and call this layout dash site. Right, so this can be my site layout. And now you'll see what happens when I actually go to my application here. You'll see it's lost the layout. I've lost the navigation, I've lost the footer, except I haven't, because I need to remember to come over here and actually reference that I want the site layout, the thing that I called site. I could have called that pink elephants, it doesn't matter. And if I refresh that, there's something I forgot to do here. So here I've done that on the tester page. I also need to do it here on the index page as well. So here, site. So this is one of the things that I find I keep slipping up on when using Qwik. Because of the index naming, sometimes I don't know what page I'm on. I think I'm on a page that I'm not on. And you can tell I move fast and break things. So I'm constantly getting myself stuck on something. But anyway, here we go. So it needs to be there on any page that I want to apply that layout to. And here you can see my layout is now back. If I go back to my tester page, here it is, right? Here's my layout, it's still there. But what if I want a different layout? Well, I can create a different layout. So let's copy this whole layout and let's call this, so let's call it layout, and we'll call it layout members.tsx. All right, great. So far you see no change, but if I was to go to tester and rename this as members as such, and here now you can see it says hello nav and goodbye nav. If I go to the home page, you can see it's got the other layout around it. Very useful, very cool. Absolutely love that. Now let's put this back to the layout that we had before, right? The site layout, because that's illustrated the point to you, but actually we're fine just to stay with the same layout. And I'm going to delete this members layout that I just did there. That was really just to show you how layouts are working. So here we are back to where we were before. Now let's start actually working with components, etc. If I go and create a console here to print things out. So let's go and open up console. I'm not using function keys to do that, by the way, because I'm using one of these M1 Macs and the electronic function key bar does not work anymore. Anyway, so what I want to do is go and create a button, right? So let's go over here to, I don't know, let's go to our tester page, and I'm just going to create some kind of button. And in fact, we'll do that in components. So let's just call this, new file button.tsx. And in fact, I'm going to call it like that, button. And there we go. So we've got this button here that says click me. And if I go back over here and refresh the page, you won't see anything there because we've not imported it yet. We're going to import it here on tester. So let's go and import. If I go to our tester page here, let's import that button. So import button, not buffer, button from button over there. And test page, here we're going to put our button, bang. Now we can see the button. There it is, right? So when I click the button, it should do something. So let's go back to our button page over here. And what we need to do is put on click, but because this is Qwik JS, we need this $. The $. Is basically, as far as I understand, it's helping Qwik identify components for lazy loading and helping it decide how to manage and when to manage how and when that JavaScript gets loaded in. I could have that completely wrong. So what I'm going to do here is actually go and create a function for this button, and I'm going to call it first of all, I need to put in a $sign. Now let's just put undefined as what happens when we click the button for now, because we still need to go and do that. What happens if I go and put console.log hello here? Let's first go and explore Qwik now. Oh, that's interesting. It console logs it to the server. If I go here to the browser, refresh the page, right? Nothing. There's nothing console logging, which there shouldn't be if I click the button because I've not given it a function. But there's nothing console logging. You can see here, it's console logging on the server, right? So every time I go and refresh this page, here we go. You can see hello, 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 hello. Interesting. Now, the way we handle life cycles in Qwik is predominantly using something called useTask. There is also something called useClientEffect. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Qwik JS for me is really all about useTask. Like get good and get used to using this useTask. So what I need to do over here is import useTask with the $sign. So now if I put in something here like useTask $ and create that just as it is right now and just put console.log hello, let's see what happens this time, right? Same thing, right? It's doing that. However, what I might want to do is track something else, right? I might want to track the state of something. So let's call this state, and we're going to bring in now, if you're used to using useState in React, we're going to use something called useSignal, and then we'll use something called useStore. So here, let's put useSignal. useSignals if you just want to track like one thing. useStores if you want to track an object. So it could have something like color, name, message, whatever it is. And here, in fact, we'll just do this. We'll call this const message, which we could call state, but because I'm using useSignal, I'll just call it message is equal to useSignal. And this is none. There's no message right now, right? So if I console log my message over here and run this, you'll see that actually it gives me a whole bunch of JavaScript here. So here I could go message.value, and then it says none. So whether I'm using useSignal or I'm using useStore, in fact, let me show you the difference here. Let's call this state, and I'm going to say in here we're going to track an object called message, and that will be state none, and this one will be signal none. So what I need to also do is bring in here, instead of using useSignal, I need useStore, because now I'm using an object. So instead of useSignal, we need useStore, and here I need to go state.message and run that. And here you see it says state none. And here if I go message.value, right, that's going to give me signal none, state none, right? So it's literally, this is how you use useSignal and useStore. Here I could have message, I could have color, and the color is no color, right? So that's what we're going to do right now, no color. So great. So useTask, basically, you can see it works a lot like useEffect, except we haven't done any side effects. We've done nothing interesting with this. What if I was to set some kind of timer, right? So let's put in here, let's put const timeout is equal to set timeout, which is a JavaScript function. And we'll put that to run after 1 second, right? And then, so here what we'll do is have it basically run after a second that message.value, right? So let's just have it go and do that. So let's hit save. And you can see it took a second and then it did it. So let's do this. Let's put 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and bang, there you go. Now, one of the things I don't want to happen is every time the component unmounts and mounts again, I don't want this complete array of timeouts being built up here. Maybe it was something like an interval, a counter or something. So what we can do here is go return, and this will be our return function, right? And that could just be something like clear timeout. And then here timeout. And in fact, I don't need all of that. I could, clear timeout is a function, so I could just return clear timeout as follows, right? So this is the same as useEffect in React. What it's going to do is it's going to kill that whatever task it is you had or whatever function you want to run when the component unmounts. So if button was to disappear for whatever reason, it would go and run that part there. So when it reappears again, it'll set a new timeout and the old one isn't still running and still going, etc. So that's something important to remember as well. But what if I want to track the state change, right? So if this state changes over here, what if I want to go and track that? So normally what you could do here is we could say something like, on click, and then here we could say, run a function that says state.message is equal to something like I was clicked. So what this should do is when we click this button, it should change the state message to something like I was clicked. But how do we actually go and track that? So let's actually, rather than having this timeout example now, let's just go back to console.log state.message. Right, let's just go back to doing that. So here it's console logging state.none. But if I go and click this button, so if I go over to here and click this, nothing happens. Nothing's coming into the console. Nothing's going on whatsoever. So how do I get this to actually work? So what I'm going to do is go and put something called track in here. So it's a callback here that we access through the curly brackets here. And I can say, okay, we need to track this state, right? So we're going to track this state. So anytime there's a change to the state, we will actually go and track that and do something like print out this console. So let's run this again. So if I go and refresh the page, you can see it's run state none. It's showing twice because the previous printout was before I did the second refresh. And if I go and look over here, nothing's happening. Now watch what happens if I hit click me. I hit click me and it says I was clicked. Down here it says nothing. Nothing's happened. Well, that's because this is the server and this is the client. This is the browser. So this tells you about how useTask runs. It runs first from the server. So it first renders from the server and then it renders from the client. Let me show you something quite interesting here. If we go to network, and here I can see JavaScript, etc. I can see everything that's been run. So here, if I look at JS, CSS, etc., I can see JavaScript. Let me just refresh this page. Watch what happens when I hit click me. Did you see here it loaded that button component? This is the secret sauce of Qwik JS. It's only loading what I need when I need it. But now look at something interesting. If I go and put in here something like useClientEffect rather than useTask, so if I go and run this and refresh the page, you can see it's loaded this button component. Let me go and undo that, back to useTask. There's no button component. So this is very interesting. This is something important to note. You should use useTask for anything that's suitable for useTask. The majority of the time, you should be using useTask. If you need something to be rendered, not on the server side, so again, look here, this useClientEffect, it renders it here in the browser, but it hasn't rendered it here from the server. If you need it to render on load from the browser without the interaction having to happen, you can use useClientEffect. Right? So rule of the thumb is use useTask. If you need it to load on the client side right off the bat without the JavaScript being interacted with, then you can use useClientEffect. If anybody wants to correct me on that, please go ahead and correct me in the comments. But that's what I gather. That's how I gather it should be used. Well, right now we've only really been operating with this one button. But most of the time, you're going to need to interact with parent components and child components, etc., context, all of that. So even though I'm not going to be covering context here in this video, in fact, the documentation is very clear, it's very good on that. What I am going to do just to finish this video is to create a child component past those props and have the child run a function from the parent. Okay, so basically everything you're going to be doing, 80% of what you're going to be doing, we're going to go and do over here now. So let's go and do that. In fact, let's go back here to index and create a store here. So use store, and we're going to say const, and we're going to call this name. Let's call it state again, and let's just say use store, and we'll put in here something like name. Okay, so the name right now is unassigned, we'll call it. And then we'll change the name from being unassigned to Sean or Tom or Sarah, pink elephants or orange monkeys. So at the same time as this button being clicked, I wanted to actually also go and change the state here of this name here, right? So now let's go and put under here something like a div tag, and the name will be as follows, right? So it'll be name and whatever the state dot name is. So that's how we'll go and do that here. So here, state.name, right now the name is unassigned. If I hit click me, it doesn't do anything. It still says name unassigned. But what I can do is actually have a function pushed through to the child, just like I would do in React, except here I'm going to use a $, and I'm going to write a function as follows, right? So it's going to say state.name is equal to pink elephants, like follows. And we need to give this function a name. So I'm going to say handle name as follows. So with this button, I'm going to pass this handle name, and we'll call this the handle function. And I'm going to pass in the function of handle name to button. Now you'll see an error comes up. It's like, I don't know what this handle function is. So let's go over to button over here. And let's pass in that as a prop. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put in interface. You could also say type props, but I'm going to say interface item props as follows. And sorry, that shouldn't be there. And here I'm going to say handle function. And I'm just going to put any. I'm sure there is a correct TypeScript type to put in here for Qwik functions, but I haven't bothered to look right now. So if you know what that is, please put it in the comments. I'm just going to put any, and this works absolutely fine. I'm happy with it that way. And then what I'm going to do here is I could pass this in as props and say the props are, item props as follows. And also I'll actually put a question mark in there as well so that it can be optional. So here I'm going to put in props, and then I'm going to say, right, rather than on click, change this message to I was clicked. We're going to say something along the lines here of const handle click, and we'll give this a $, as follows. And we need to import that $ here as well so that we can actually go and use it. So we've imported the $, and I'm going to go and handle this click here. So let's go and change this here to just say handle click. And I'm going to say, all right, the message, or sorry, the state message, we can get rid of this signal because we're not using it. Let's just say the state.message is equal to button clicked. That's what the message is going to say. So this will here go and console log that message for us. But I also want to take my props dot, and that was actually, what did we call that here? We called that the handle function, props.handle function. We want to go and call that as well, right? So this button will do two things now. It'll click, but it will also go and run this function that I've passed down to it from the parent component. So on the test page, we have this parent component passing that function in. It should go and run. So let's go and hit click me, and there you go. The name now says pink elephants, and it also says button clicked. The button clicked came from this useTask, which is tracking whatever happens. And one thing I haven't tested out yet, by the way, is tracking like multiple states, multiple things within one useTask. It'll be interesting to see how that works. The changing the name of pink elephants, there's no console log for because we didn't console log it. We could console log it here, but we actually just rendered it out here on the page, right? We rendered it on the test page. And that is how that useTask is working. So for most of what you're going to do, other than the use context, right? So when you want to sort of persist state across your app, etc., most of what you're going to want to do, this is how to do it with Qwik JS. And what I love about it is it only loads what I need as I need it. And I'm going to be using it like that pretty much all the time. So I'll keep you up to speed with how the development's going with the CodeRadars web platform. So going back to this here, if you are interested, if you want to understand how I'm building an app from start to finish, why I'm doing it, what's the commercial reason, how do I monetize that, all of that, then this could be useful for you. If not, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. And until the next one, remember to shut up and code.